Well, hello. How are you today? Seriously, shalom, me homies. What's going on? Listen, I have not had a lot of time to sit down and just do the old fashioned, let's sit down and dive into the depths of a random conglomeration of books that I'm studying. I have been doing all these other interviews and other shows lately amidst a myriad of other things. But I'm doing a lot of research right now because someone asked me to cover a topic based area that I am passionate about. So I'm just going to, you know what? I'm going to sit down. It's super early in the morning. There is not thunder. Big Thunder is not awake. So I've got a moment. Let's dig in. I wanted to show you guys some of the things that I'm using right now for like a deep quest into dive of lost narratives regarding history and timelines, because obviously there's lots of you who have all kinds of questions regarding this topic. And it's something I've endeavored to study many times over the I first got introduced to a lot of this stuff years ago, but like really concentrated, focused efforts on understanding like alternative history big time was like over the last 5 years. My family traveled full time in an RV for almost 5 years, about 4.5 years. Those of you that don't know, that came to a very horrifically brutal conclusion. Chell and I were going to sit down. She's got an entire notebook full of notes about like if we could do a synopsis of like everything we learned along the way of that ridiculous timeline. Oh, listen, we've been through some stuff, y'all, when it comes to traveling and road life and boondocking and styles and types of vehicles and choices and water and damage and poop and black tanks and like ridiculous experiences. For whatever it's worth, strongly consider what I'm about to say next because we lived in and amongst all kinds of different communities in different climates all over this country. Most RVs are not built to last whatsoever. Most travel trailers are made to die, just die on the side of the road, despair, saturated with mold, utter ruinous heaps of terribleness, especially stuff that's been built since 2018 and 19. Thank you. Designed to fail, destroying people's lives every day. Designed to meet the uptick in demand of everyone that was like, everyone is trapped in the cities. We're not allowed to leave our homes. Honey, let's move into an RV and go full time, baby. Reasonable idea. We did it ourselves. We learned some painful lessons. Buses are made to be on the roads. Buses are made to travel across the country. Buses are made to be waterproof, like waterproof. RVs with slides are not. Super painful and awkward for some of us to talk about. They're not. You can't keep the water out. One deluge can completely destroy your home. 100%. I'm lost in the weeds on RV stuff. Anyways, composting toilet changed our life forever. You want to take that poo and fertilize creation with it. Just tuck that away for whatever it's worth. We'll dive down into it. We were going to try to record it last night, but we were stinging drop dead exhausted because we went for a vicious hike. It was fantastic. Reynolds are trying to get in serious shape here. You know what I'm saying? Like, can you actually haul your bug out load? You know what I'm saying, y'all? Just saying. Beware the Ravagers. They're coming. Cataclysms are like a reality. They happen sequentially and repeating cycles constantly. There's these like legitimate resets that take place every so often where like everything is burned with fire or floods or mud. Just crazy earthquakes, just that level of crazy experiential learning. But hey, check this out. I've got a book here. Got a few different books. This one, for those of you that have never seen these two. This beautiful area behind me I have to take down almost every single day and set it back up. But it's so worth it because at least I have a couple of my books. Okay, here's the thing. When I want to like dive in and study a topic, there's an amazing amount of resources that are available online, which is super helpful and highly valuable because you can do something like query in a search, just open up your search bar and type it in. But if you use traditional search engines like Google, for example, you're going to get a certain set of narratives that are prescribed to you that are ever changing based off the whims of the programmers, right? The people that have a collective agenda, maybe you could call them the non-elected rulers that sit behind the scene, right? The Illuminati. They're very naughty, right? out of Weishaupt and the Jesuits. You know what I'm saying? Change agents, chameleons, those kinds of folkies, right? The dirty trickster squads. Well, they have this collective intelligence tool known as the internet now, that they also have the ability to augment and, take things out, edit history. However, there's this incredible resource that's found in books, which doesn't change so rapidly. And this is really important for the narrative of our conversation today, because when we hold a physical text like this is written by Gloria Farley. Some of you are going to go online immediately and try to buy this, and you're going to be like, "Dadgummit, Nathan, you always recommend books I can't find." I'm sorry. You need to learn how to look better. Look more diligently. I'm serious. I'm going to challenge you. Be better. Do harder. Do the hard things. I don't want to give you an easy assignment. Stink and make you soggy. I'm here to make you tougher. You betcha. It's good for you. Like 4.5 years in the RV life did to me. Freaking ruined me. Savaged me. Like it changed me immediately. Go back to rolling with the Reynolds. Want to watch the ridiculous of what the Reynolds looked like 5 years ago? Hysterical. Ugh. We look like a bunch of young chaps. My wife and I are weathered. Go to episode 1, then go to the end. You're like, good gosh, this family's been through some stuff. Dang right. Including trying to tote around all these books all over the country. One of my favorite things to bury in the mountains and in the woods and the places I like to hide things, besides types of things, is books, because they're explosive all into themselves. You know, this one will explode all kinds of programming in people's minds and make them realize that they're like sleeper cell assassins. Go figure. It's like, dadgummit. It's going to undo part of the empire. Black Awakening by Russ Dizdar, for those of you who are listening by audiobook. Now available. Charity, that's the daughter. She's the last survivor of this family because they utterly blotted these people out. You know, shocker. Super Warriors, they got it stinking done, son. He put out thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of like war material before they got his stinking ticket. Praise be to Yahuwah. Go and do likewise. Don't mourn the dead. Sting and let the dead bury themselves. Move on. Carry their banner ferociously. Anyways, shadowthedarkness.net. His daughter, Charities, has been working very diligently to get that thing back in print, because printing rights when people are killed is ridiculous. But what is it? Shatterworldwide.com or shatterworldwide.net. Regardless, you guys can go there. I'm pretty sure they have pre-orders going right now. They may be shipping out orders. I'm not too sure. Either way, I'm just very thankful that a book like that is getting out on the line. But that's kind of one of those books that's been like that. Here's another one. This guy, John Darnell, took a stinking hammering because, he came out and spoke the truth about why we should preach the gospel to every creature, even if they're Nephilim, vampires, transhuman. Some of you are like, dadgummit, Joshua was told to blot out all the people because they were Nephilim. Listen, folks, listen, I love you. I love you. It was the iniquities of the Amorites. It was the iniquities of the people. Like their choices. I know that some of you are going to bother you. It's your choices that you're responsible for, way more so than your bloodline. Something to consider. If you even have like an iota of a desire to potentially be redeemed, repent, turn from like the ways of chaos and towards like the path of life, you can be redeemed. It is not because they were simply born into a bloodline of the Nephilim, right? Or the Rephaim, the Zamzummim, the ites. It's not just because of their bloodline that they were blotted out. It was their choices. It's like, hey, don't go slaughter your babies and bury them into the walls. Yahuwah's got a problem with that. The innocent blood cries out from your foundation stones. This is why the city of London and all of the architectural nightmares that what people have done in sacrificing their children through the practice of inurement into the walls of the foundations of their buildings. Some of you listening today in South Africa and Central America, you guys are familiar with this practice, these rites, these rituals, Tanzania and Kenya. This is still a practice today, you guys. You can still go hire witch doctors who will come and sacrifice animals or babies and put them in the walls of buildings to spiritually charge it. This is like the way the world's been. But this is another guy whose book, The Gospel of Every Creature, got completely blotted out. And you know what? It takes diligence to find things like this. But once you have them, it's an amazing resource because it can't be altered once it's physically in your hand, whereas everything else out there can be. He has another book, which is on, what is it called? For what it's worth, you guys. Those of you here, let me just tell you how to be creative, and how to overcome and adapt, right? I'm trying to give you difficult assignments so that you'd be tougher, okay? Here's his other books. Let me show you this. Let me get you a little breadcrumb trail. See, some of you can be resourceful and you can find a book like this, even if it's one copy. All it takes, you guys, you have the collective intelligence of the internet and people that are resourceful, right? Satanic Strategies Exposed. Nephilim in the Promised Land, John Darnell. Now, what happened in Australia is obviously they weren't a fan of people speaking the truth because they're they're a colony of the empire, right? The real dirty tricksters, y'all. The British Empire, the British Crown. You got a bunch of Germans masquerading as Britons who are running that empire over there. It's shocking. The history of the world is ridiculous. It's fantastically messed up. But they didn't like that this guy was going out there and talking about any of these things. So they ferociously persecuted and tried to blot him out of history. Praise be to Yah. Anyways, you can get a hold of a book like that. Just takes one of you. Get a hold of a book like that. Digitally scan it in. PDF, instantly available. Internet archive, upload. You're welcome. You could also, some of you who are savage audio people, could do an audio recording. I would love to. There will come a day when I'm not having to constantly transition my life every single stinking day. And I'll be able to sit down and record all of these endlessly in audio fashion. Until such a time, you guys get me shotgun pattern, the spaghetti bowl of my brain, giving you out all the data dumps simultaneously. Hang on. It's ridiculous. I don't care. I like it. Anyways, these are some of my favorite stinking books to uncover the realities and paradigms about the world. So let's preach ferociously. Now, here's another one, okay? I've got a treasure hunt that I've been on for a long time, like maybe 8 or 9 years old. The first time I really got an understanding that the 10 Commandments were the first copy of the 10 Commandments. You guys know what I'm talking about? There's these sapphire tablets. Paradigm shifter here. Some of you are like, what? What? Hold on. Let's go to another book. Sorry. I've got to get it without getting that raccoon trap to go off next to my hand. It's super fun. You guys catch raccoons? I have a baby squirrel that's within 10 feet of my face right now. Maybe 10 yards. It's in the same room as me. We got a baby squirrel that we're nursing back to health. It was dehydrated and dying, and it went back to Mother Superior. That's my wife. Her name's Chelsea. She's stinking epic. Gosh dang it. I love her. She loves to nurture things. She's a nurturer. That's why Yahuwah sent her me. He's like, hey, you want to nurture something? Nurture this train wreck of a man. You betcha. You can be with him a long time. He'll wreck your world. You'll be good for him. He'll be good for you. You'll stretch each other. He'll teach you how to sneak into places that say for authorized personnel only. You'll teach him how to love humans again. Not all of them. I still don't love all of them. A huge amount of them desire a plethora of time spent at the end of one of these because they will not stop. Start praying that their hearts stop, you guys. Challenge accepted. Just start praying that Yahuwah stops their hearts. Some of you are like, yeah, but you're supposed to love your enemies. Personal injury. Understand the context of a lot of the verses that you guys read about when it comes to forgiveness. Personal injury. Okay? Personal injury. Also understand that there's some people who meddled with your Bible to change some things and augment some things so that you wouldn't actually consider the non-elected rulers as like enemy number ones that you should wage your war against. Instead, you're like, just submit to the government. That's what we're supposed to do. We're just supposed to submit. I'm like, you guys have not read the Bible much. Like, it's not a pacifistic book. I'm sorry. It's really not. Like, my Messiah is going to be drenched in blood. I like that. He's going to rule with a rod of sapphire iron. Like, he's going to crush the heads of the enemy. He's going to break the teeth of the wicked. I freaking like that guy. I love him a lot. Anyways, check this out, you guys. Exodus 24:10. Paradigm shifter. You ready for this? 10 Commandments were made out of sapphire. Savage, check this out. You ready for this? For context, we're going back in time a little bit to this history of when the people of Yisrael, right? The covenant-keeping warriors of Yahuwah, right? You want to be like that? Covenant keeping, bro. It's all about covenant. You're either under the covenant of the law of sin and death, the covenant of sin and death. That's what you under, or you're under the covenant of life. You got to choose. Choose this day who you're going to serve. You can be with the homies of death and the homies of Hades. You know what I'm saying? Or you can be with the homies of righteousness. There's not 3 kingdoms. There's not 4 kingdoms. There's a kingdom of life and the kingdom of death. There's no kingdom of the gray out there, son. Anyways, Exodus 24:10. Check this out. They're gearing up for this amazing showdown where they're going to have a marriage ceremony. Ketuvah. Right? They're going to have like a contract between the Most High, Yahuwah Elohim Sevaoth, as he is referenced oftentimes. We're going to literally look at an inscription in something called epigraphy, a carving in stone, where Yahuwah Elohim, Yahuwah Elohaikum, is literally carved in stone here in the Americas, because America is not the new world. I'm sorry. It's a paradigm shifter for some of you. You're going to have a hard time with that. The Americas are not the new world. This is just everything you've ever received in the entirety of your life, more or less, is a lie. If you can swallow that down, it's going to be super painful. It's going to feel like razor blades to your like cognitive dissonance, and it's going to make you want to be an ostrich and go shove your head back in the sands of ignorance. Hang with me here. America is the old world. I know. That's super awkward. It's going to lead to a lot of maps changing and names changing and locations changing and paradigms changing, but it's going to be good for you. You're going to go on a ridiculous journey of understanding about like the nature of the land you literally live in. Not all of you, I understand. I love you guys that are in Switzerland. Praise Yah for your marvelous Swiss engineering. stinking savage. Do you know why the Swiss got so adept at a lot of their watchmaking capabilities and their fine tooling of machineries? Because a revival broke out. Check this out. The red light districts and the brothels and the drunkards and all that kind of like, that was like the majority of the people. Yeah, they got like legitimately transformed because the power of the living word got in their lives. And they're like, okay, well, we can't all be whores and hookers anymore. So we should figure out something else to do with our time. And they're like, I can't just be a dirtbag dad who's hooking up with a bunch of rowdy rabble rousers in the night. So we better do something. Birthed into that with amazing ingenuity, the Father gave out a spirit of creativity and cultivation like he did with the Tabernacle builders. Praise Yah for Andrew Hoy. Freaking love you, dude. I know you don't know me from much of anybody. We've only spoken at a conference briefly together, you know. Bro, you changed the paradigm. This is what the Tabernacle looked like. Not that stupid rectangle. I don't say it to be derogatory towards the legitimate Tabernacle of Yahuwah. That ridiculous little rectangle is a shoebox. My wife and I just literally went to a recreation of Moses's tabernacle in person, and I could stink and cry. It was so unutterably not impressive. Like they literally just took curtains, unused space. People don't know how to follow instructions. It's like all the stinking unprofessionals. You go into the United States military and you're like, sweet, I'm finally going to be with the elite soldiers, right? I looked at all the posters. I read all the propaganda. This one. Propaganda, Russian posters of World War I. Well, I read through all this stuff as a child. Like I looked at all the propaganda the United States military had to offer me. And I was like, I want to be like them. I want to be the best of the best of the best. Yes, I do. I want to be like them. Well, they've been dealing out this amazing savage propaganda. Dude, they have way better propaganda. Look at that savage slayer of dragons. Freaking epic. That's how the world actually looked. I know you were brainwashed to believe dragons aren't real. I'm sorry. People lied to you. They had an agenda, which was to deceive you. They're subtle, crafty sons of the serpent. I know. It's awkward. You're going to have to go back and tell your mom that the liars at school are making you memorize lies. And maybe she'll tell you, don't memorize lies, honey. Or, unfortunately, a lot of parents like, just memorize the lie, honey. Go along to get along. Great. Be a compromiser for the rest of your life. Is that the literal lineage you want to leave your children? Be like, yeah, I told my children they should memorize lies the rest of their life to get by. Be a compromised coward the rest of your life. Or how about you be brave? How about you be a dissident, a rebel? How about you be a righteous rebel rouser? You know what I'm saying? Like, they had great propaganda, phenomenal imagery, iconography. You know what I'm saying? They're like, be a warrior, ride these beautiful steeds into battle. This was sweet back when horses were still a part of mankind's life. You know, they're like, dude, they had savage horseplay. You know what I'm saying? Consider it strongly. Either way, I grew up in an era where propaganda of soldier life was the way to be, you know, and I thought for certain by the time I get in the United States Army, I was going to be a part of an elite cadre of absolute professionals. And instead, I literally got Elmer Fudd's. Do you know what I'm talking about? Gomer Pyle. I was like saturated during the time of the surge in Afghanistan, and a lot of it was being pushed into Iraq. And we literally, the recruiting standards of the United States military dropped down to the bottom of the barrel. They're like, okay, we're not going to take you if you have 3 felonies. We'll take you if you have two felonies. You betcha, you know, and I get it. Most of the felons are ridiculously stuck in a totally different rat race of the prison industrial complex. I'm going to get lost on that side tangent, you guys. But the degradation of the literal intelligence, the baseline intelligence of most of the soldiers that I was a part of in the military was like 2 standard deviations below the norm. You know, like we had guys that, not a joke, were just barely above mentally retarded, like cognitively retarded. It was unbelievable. And they had a failure to follow instructions, right? Failure to follow instructions was like the defining characteristics of the vast majority of my experience inside the Army at large. And it was devastatingly frustrating. And that's why when you finally get opportunities to work with like very capable professional soldiers, you're like, finally, someone who understands how to have a high degree of obedience to an instruction set. You know, like you get a manual for a battery of arms on how to operate a light, like thunder raining down on my head. My son is just thunderously awake. That means I've only got minutes here. We better make this count. Either way, like when you finally get an opportunity to learn how to fire the M249 SAW, right? Squad automatic weapon, like fires a 5.56 magazine, belt fed or potentially magazine fed machine gun, right? There's a very specific set of instructions on the battery of arms, exactly how to drive this machine very effectively, how to use it effectively in tactics and squads. If you don't follow those instructions, you're gonna be stinking screwed, son. You're gonna have malfunctions, you're gonna have all kinds of problems, and this thing can straight up blow up in your face. You can burn your hand in a third-degree way instantly from grabbing a hold of a red hot barrel instead of understanding how to do a barrel change. Anyways, we got a whole bunch of people that took the Bible, they took the historical books too, of all different kinds. And then they put their interpretations, their mystical interpretations, because we got a bunch of Babylonian mystics running the show. We've got like literal criminal mafia organizations who are like, hey, this is what the tabernacle looks like. Bam. Yeah, buddy. You got a shoebox in the desert. Glory to Yah. That's what it looks like in the heavens. Moses was given an exact representation in the heavenlies, like an exact. They're like, hey, Moshe, come up here. And Moshe's like, you got it, Yahuwah. He goes up there, y'all, 40 days, 40 nights, no eating, no drinking, like super deep fast, savage fast, by the way. So don't believe the liars that tell you in survival school you can't go 3 days without water. Freaking liars, every one of them. Like, it's an actual lie. They're lying to your face, because you can go through the historical text and immediately find examples of people that went longer than that. Like, I'm reading the book called The Gulag Archipelago, all about the creative, inventive ways of how a gulag system, right? The colonialists, the communists, the Bolsheviks, all these different iterations of things that took place in the Soviet Union, and how they locked down all forms of freedom, of intellectualism, and all these other things, right? But they talk about the torture, starvation, deprivation, sleep deprivation, stuff you would think about in like the Holocaust. They like go through a lot of that. A lot of that was patented products of the gulags. Dude, just an amazing endeavor. Highly recommend it. It's a good audiobook as well for those of you that are not going to sit down and read a 20-hour audiobook or listen to a 20-hour audiobook. It's well worth your time to read. Some of you have the gift of time. Invest it wisely. Anyways, you can find specific examples of people that went far more than 3 days without water all throughout history. Something to consider. Either way, Moses, he's up on the mountain, right? Sinai. The place that most people inherited as Sinai is a bunch of Catholic garbage, nightmare traditions. Go figure. A bunch of pagans who are masquerading as Christians, calling themselves the leaders of the world. They're like, this is surely the mountain that Moses went up on. You're like, ain't nobody going to fit here. Dadgummit, Catherine. Nobody's going to fit here. Nobody's going to believe this narrative. She's like, they'll believe it or we'll kill them all. You're like, okay, you win. Monsters, stinging parasites everywhere. Anyways, Moses goes up there. He's up on the mountain. Yahuwah is like, hey, let me show you exactly the way to build my tabernacle. Dude, down to a stinking rivet. He's like, you ain't even gonna screw up any of this. I'm gonna show you exactly how to build every single piece of this tabernacle. And you're gonna go down there and you're gonna dictate to them very specific, precise instructions. And then the spirit of Yahuwah was gonna come upon two primarily leaders in order to give them the ability to have mastery in artisans, right? Mastery in textiles, fabrics, metallurgy, everything, so they can make it. What you don't end up with is this. You know what you're looking at when you see this, you guys? This is somebody who lied. They were intellectually dishonest with you about the actual instructions. They have a lot of materials in here that don't exist in the Torah, in the instructions of Yahuwah. They instead started adding things and taking away things in order to make it look like that and make it fit like that. Wonderfully, what's such a good gift is we have people that are super smart and way smarter than me in an area called like engineering and architecture. This guy, Andrew Hoy, his website is project314.org. Andrew, I know I randomly always introduce your stuff in the middle of the most ridiculous other rants. It's just a textbook example of stinking liars working diligently to deceive people and beguile them and make everything about the Bible seem boring and stupid. Like it does. This is it. Like, this is the representations you get in your children's Bibles of brainwashing. They're like, yeah, that's it. Glory to Yah. Box in the wilderness with some tents around it, some curtains around it. Oh, look, a little tiny cloud. You think that cloud's going to be that helpful in a stinking desert? I want an entire thundercloud around the entirety of my head to shield me from the suffering of summer heat in the desert, right? It creates dew in the wilderness and it makes grass grow so that the livestock isn't dying and miserable versus just the embarrassment. Anyways, I'm going to get lost in the weeds on this. I highly encourage you guys, check out Project 314 and you can see how literally pi, 3.14159 pi is encoded into the tabernacle diameter. Like there's so many little facets and features to our skeletal structure, the amount of bones and vertebrae and ribs. Like the tabernacle is the complexity of the culmination of creation. It is one of the most beautiful, intricate things that you can even begin to imagine and establish in your life, of an understanding that our Father is amazing and awesome, and his instructions are pure and trustworthy and well worth your time of study. So, but when you go give somebody the shoebox version of the tabernacle, they're like, apparently God likes rectangles. You're like, dadgummit, he doesn't like rectangles. A bunch of Freemasonic perverts like rectangles. Stinking pervs, man, all up in the business. Anyways, we went out to this tabernacle and I got really ticked, throughout the entirety of it. And because there's always a hidden hand agenda behind these things, and you're like, what's your real reason for this? You bunch of the Luciferians, it's like old world architecture. We're going to have to go there, you guys. They're like, yeah, we for sure built that. You can trust us. We're the government. Uh-huh. Lost narratives of history. Here's another one I'm working with, you guys. Where are you? Here's one. John Levy. Classic shout out. Brosifs. John Levy. David Edward. Evidence of the Old World. This is the one I've been reading through. I don't know. I'm like 75 pages into it. We've been dealing with brick construction and all these, uncomfortable, awkward buildings that they're like, yeah, we threw these up in like 2 or 3 years for you guys. Just have fun. Have fun. I know we got mud flats out there for the roads, but you guys get colossus endeavoring achievements to the gods. We don't think about this. When you read the Bible and they talk about like pagan deities and gods and temples, this is what they were looking at. Way more complex and awe-inspiring, like ridiculous, incredible architecture and design features that were beyond anything of like your wildest dreams. They're like, no, they were people with sticks. Them Nephilim were just big, tall dudes for sure. They didn't build like power grids and plasma controlled stations. No. They're just dudes in tents for sure. You can trust us. It's like they didn't have power and electricity way back before the time when you think so. They didn't have photography and videography back in the 1800s, sometime we didn't think so. It's like, no, man, their pyramids stinking everywhere. Oh, I'm sidetracked again. Hang with me, you guys. Just look at the beauty of this stuff. Look at the fountain. I have to get another camera, you guys, so I can do like a book camera and read along with. Just look at that stinking place. Let's just read about that one. Let's just jump in there. One of the key administrative buildings was the fair's headquarters, which served as the nerve center for the entire exposition. It was typically where major decisions concerning the event's management were made, and where organizers, including figures like Michael H. DeYoung, coordinated their activities. The building was essential for the centralized management of an event of this magnitude, which included exhibitions and many social activities, performances, and education programs. Okay, this section here is dealing with the expositions of the world fairs, right? Staggering, incredible endeavors about old world technology being masqueraded in front of men who are basically trying to decide, hey, do we want to continue to be the parasites and just cull off all of the history of the world and brainwash everyone into Luciferianism and just destroy everything good about humanity and make them all a bunch of like fat, sick, and nearly dead slaves? And they're like, yeah, let's do that. They're like burning the whole old world down. You're like, sucks. Could have had free energy for everybody. Random side note of my research lately. Turkmenistan. You can move to Turkmenistan. Not likely, but you can try. Free power, free water, free utilities, all citizens. Turkmenistan. You're like, yeah, this kingdom of Tartaria. I digress. Either way, the world is full of incredible histories that are just lost to us, unfortunately, because we do have a bunch of people that their agenda is to go along to get along, be the kingdom of the compromisers. But Moses was not like that. There's these like strange set apart people that were not about that. Thank you, Andrew Hoy, for not being a coward and compromising and just bowing down to all the peer pressure to be like, no, you should go back to looking like us and acting like us and talking like us. This is not the accepted model. Endure persecution is good for you. Moses endured a lot. Let's get back to the 10 Commandments, shall we? I'm reading from the Sapphire. Unfortunately, there's some compromised ethics in here too. Dadgummit. Always are. If you guys never heard of it, the Sapphire, which is a conglomeration of... It's okay, hon. I'm just doing a video. They're up. Time has passed. Big Thunder has risen from his chamber. He will thunder down here eventually. He's gigantic. I have a giant of a son. It's fantastic. People are like, are you a Nephilim? I'm like, look at my son. He's gigantic. Savage. Let's make some of you more uncomfortable. Let's read the Bible. Sick. Okay, now let me just say it real quick. The Apocrypha is included in the Sefer, et Sefer, right? This is like the 3rd edition, maybe. He changes a whole lot of stuff in order to suit his ideas of needs and doctrine over time, which sucks. So like if you have the digital version of the et Sefer, it's a valuable resource because you can search in there. I love that feature. One of my favorite features that I've ever found. He has an et Sefer app. Anyways, you can search through all these other texts that were ripped and raped out of our Bibles because they're like, don't you give people access to the information that's super helpful and truthful? Don't do it. They might figure something out. None of that. So books like Jubilees, First Enoch, Sirach, stuff that used to be in our Bibles, Ecclesiasticus, as it was called, First and Second Baruch. Gosh dang it, savage, amazing stuff. The books of the Maccabees, also finely tuned, interesting pieces of the historical narrative that you're lost without it. Either way, unfortunately, the Et Sefer is one of the hardest to read books I've ever read. It sucks. It's like stepping back into 5th century, 16th century Elizabethan English. And that has to do with how translators are like masquerading around copyright laws. And they're like, I'll just take from this translation, throw it in here, and then I'll change about 20% of the words so that I can get a copyright for it and trademark it myself. I understand that's an approach that some people want to take. I think it's not correct. I think it's dirty and disgusting, and I think you should do the diligence of doing the entirety of the translation. It would be very powerful. One of my favorites out there, you guys, is called Yah's Scriptures. They've got an Apocrypha included section that doesn't have all this kind of other filler information. You know what I'm saying? Anyways, there's no additional random Acts chapter 29 thrown into that Bible. Anyways, I don't have a copy with me right now, but let's read Exodus 24:10. Either way, I find this book valuable as a research tool and one which puts back into it some of the things that were taken out, like the Aleph Tav. The Aleph Tav is an addition in the Hebrew text that you'll find all throughout from Genesis to Revelation. Even the New Testament, you guys, was written in Hebrew. Oh, that's a super big, long conversation we're going to have to get into someday. But all of it was Hebrew. I know. It's like the actual Edenic language of creation. It's like the first language, which means if we ever want to know anything about anything, we should probably understand Hebrew. It'd be highly beneficial for our life. But the vast majority of all of our Bibles don't make the annotated additional note every time the Aleph and the Tav, that's the first letter of the Paleo-Hebrew alphabet, and the last letter. Okay? You've ever heard this passage where Yeshua says, I am the Aleph and the Tav? The beginning and the end, right? That's a big declarative statement. And if you had actually read the Hebrew text, or if you'd been given a Bible that contained the Aleph and the Tav still within it, as was actually in the text, you would have known he's like intricately woven through the entirety of the scripture. Because as you're reading along, you'll literally see this little, bunch of pearls are going to fall out of this Bible. I literally hide pearls in my wife's Bible. It's hilarious. It's how I try to romance her. I don't really tell her all this stuff directly. I like tell it to her through videos and write books about her and stuff. And then I hope someday she'll stumble upon it. I'm trying to scavenger hunt my wife. Okay, as you're reading along in here, all right, you'll see that there's Yahuwah, El Yahuwah, which is one of the most valuable aspects of this is you will see the actual names of Yahuwah that are put in here, like Yahuwah Sevaoth, which in most of your Bibles would say like the Lord God Almighty or the Lord of Hosts. El Shaddai is like the Lord God Almighty. But those are just titles. Like those are things people ripped his name out. They're like, we don't want to give people the name. Screw that. Let them know him as a title. God. Okay, there's literally a passage in the Bible that says, I'm going to take the name of God out of your mouth and you'll never call me by that name again. Something to consider. Either way, you'll see in here that when they translate often as God, really got to get another camera here. Oh, come on, let's do it. Let's do it. I'm going to get there. Yes. And upon the nobles of the children of Yasharel, he laid not his hand. Also, they saw et, there it is, Aleph Tav, Elohim, and did eat and drink. Okay, that little Aleph Tav symbol is scattered all throughout the entirety of the scriptures. It's a very interesting little annotation that's put there for a reason. Unfortunately, most people take it out of all of the Bibles. And so that was one of the things that attracted me initially to the Et Sefer, was that, first of all, I could actually find out the actual names of my creator, his actual titles in a language that I could understand that were transliterated in such a way. And I found it very valuable for that. I have the second edition, which is hard to find, and it's like a stupid amount of money right now. But it was my favorite one, much preferred. He started changing a lot of these things. Like he took out Yisrael and just changed it to a made-up version called Yasharel, which is not an accurate transliteration. Anyways, there's a whole bunch of things that I get lost in when it comes to Hebrew manuscripts and textual criticism and all the rest of it. And I generally get ticked off because I just abhor when people take what is a pure, authentic text and then just start like muddying the waters with confusion. Oh, it just makes me want to burn their house down. I abhor it. I just zealous anger rises up from within the bowels of my liver, and I'm just wanting to seek with vengeance to put things in right order. Anyways, Exodus 24. And he said unto Moshe, come up unto El Yahuwah, you and Aharon, Nadab and Abihu, and the 70 of the elders of Israel, and worship far off. And Moshe alone shall come near El Yahuwah, but they shall not come near, neither shall the people go up with him. And Moshe came and told the people at all the words of Yahuwah, and at all the judgments. And all the people answered with one voice and said, all the words which Yahuwah has said, we will do. That's literally a marriage ceremony. You know, you've ever heard the pastor, the priest, right? The guy who was actually holding over the ceremony. This is the law of the vows. We call them vows nowadays. This is your vow. Man reads vows. Woman reads her vows. She reads vows. And then he says, do you agree to these things? And they're like, this we shall do. You know, I do. I do so solemnly swear. All that stuff, right? That's a contract known as a covenant, the Brit. Very important. Like Yahuwah watches over his covenant to bring it to come to pass. It's a super powerful term. And that's why like the targeting of marriage was one of the main epicenters of like where the dragon went after. He's like, you know what? We're going to put our change agents on the covenant of marriage. Attack that. And you're like, okay, highly effective, because that is supposed to be the example to everyone about what covenant should really look like. Covenant. We are supposed to be in a covenant with him. So if you take your covenantal vows, this is literally the section of the scriptures, the Torah, the loving instructions of Yah, where you can find out about the covenant. And Yahuwah gives this list of things like, this is what I will do for you. This is what you need to do for me in return. If you do not do these things, this is what will happen to you. If you come back to me, this is what will happen to you. It's really important. It's like the entirety of the scriptures from Genesis to Revelation. This story plays out over and over again. It's a really important study of kingdom covenant theology, critical for all things related to it. This is literally the moment that we're like, I promise to be yours. You be mine. I'll be yours. He's like, I'll feed you. I'll clothe you. I'll shelter you. I'll provide for you. I'll protect you. I'll meet your needs and satisfy you continually. However, if you turn to me and you go play the way of the whore, you know, you go and start fiddling around with a whole bunch of other fiddlesticks, you're going to lose everything that we have instead of blessings. You're going to get curses, you know, like read Leviticus 26. There's these promised regathering of his people from the four corners of this earth and just beautiful prosperity that comes upon them. And also there's this like, that's never come to pass, by the way, for those of you that are like, it happened. No, it didn't. You don't know anything about eschatology because you don't know the front half of the book. Front 2/3 of the book has a lot of very important promises about what has to take place before Yeshua reigns. And it's not taking place, you guys. You're woefully ignorant of the reality about the second Exodus. It's not the little season, for what it's worth. I could sting and throw rocks at all of your houses, but I won't, because I love you. Instead, I'll throw words. And we'll look at all of those words of Yahuwah's houses. Check this out. And Moshe wrote all the words of Yahuwah and rose up early in the morning and built an altar under the hill and 12 pillars according to the 12 tribes of Israel. And he sent young men of the children of Israel, which offered ascending offerings and sacrificed peace offerings of oxen unto Yahuwah. And Moshe took half the blood and put it in basins, and half of the blood he sprinkled on the altar. And he took the Sapphire of the covenant. That's literally a very distinct text here, okay? The book of the covenant. This is different than just the general way we would say it's the Torah, right? The first 5 books of Moses, as they're often referred to. This is a separate text, an individual text, like an actual contract, the actual covenant that was signed in blood, okay? These are like the literal fingerprint of Yahuwah's on this thing. You know, he's like signed with his own finger. Real important text here. He took that and he's separating it out because now the people have agreed to the terms and conditions. Clicked yes on that box. And he took the Sapphire of the covenant and read it in the audience of the people. And they said, all that Yahuwah has said we will do, and be obedient. And Moshe took the blood and sprinkled it on the people and said, behold, the blood of the covenant which Yahuwah has cut with you concerning all these words. Then went up Moshe and Aharon, Nadab and Abihu, and the 70 of the elders of Israel. And they saw at the Aleph Tav, the Elohim of Yisrael, and under his feet, as it were, a paved work of sapphire stones, and as it were, the body of heaven in his clearness. And the nobles of the children of Israel laid not his hand, He laid not his hand. Also, they saw at Elohim and did eat and drink. They saw the Aleph Tav, Elohim, ate and drank. And Yahweh said unto Moshe, come up to me into the mountain and be there, and I will give you sapphire stones and a Torah and commandments, which I have written, that you may teach them. And Moshe rose up and his minister, Joshua, right? And went up into the mount of Elohim. And he said unto the elders, tarry here for us until we come again unto you. And behold, Aharon and Korai are with you. If any man have any matters to do, let him come up to him. And Moshe went up into the mount, and a cloud covered at the mountain. And the glory of Yahuwah abode upon Mount Sinai, and the cloud covered it 6 days. And the 7th day he called unto Moshe out of the midst of the cloud. And the sight of the glory of Yahuwah was like a devouring fire on the top of the mountain in the eyes of the children of Israel. And Moshe went into the midst of the cloud and got him up into the mountain. And Moshe was in the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. Come on, freaking sick. It's awesome. I love it. All right, check this out. Yahuwah is literally going to give him like the material list of what he needs in order to practice this instruction successfully, right? He's like, here's some sapphire tablets. Boom. Sapphire stones, baby. I got some sapphire stones. Ready? This is a ruby. There's a ruby. Let's see. You can see this one. They grow in these beautiful hexagonal kind of shapes. There's a ruby. Savage. Don't mind the little ticky-tacky stuff. I used to stick it on all my speakers and all my microphones and stuff. I love this stuff. Here's a better one, though. Here's my deadly little Boker by Magnum. You know, Way of the Blade. Blade of the day. I can get it lost in there. But this one was made for dagger work, right? When I would do needlework. But instead, a guy gave me a copy of the Torah. He's like, listen, bro, you should use your pen. He gave me this sweet pen, a fountain pen. And he's like, you should write a copy of the Torah with your own hand. It was one of the prerequisites. If you were going to be king, literally start your kingdom. You're like, boom, I'm going to be a ruler of my people. Yeah, yeah. Yahweh literally says, sit down, son. You're going to write a copy of the Torah with your own hand. Prerequisite for leadership in the kingdom of Yahweh. I don't know that we have a single documented example of any king of Israel ever doing it. The only one, and this would have been amazing because you think you're real responsible now with all these things and duties and requirements and jobs to do, right? You got all this busy stuff to get to. You're like, you're now the president in chief. Sit down and write the Torah. It's like the loving instructions of Yahuwah. That will change you forever. It'll teach you about government and ruling, and you'll now be thinking about it through a very different paradigm. Anyways, my buddy has done that. I've got quite a few friends that have literally sat down and written the entirety of the scriptures. That's my big book up there. Hello, my lady. Anyways, something super valuable to do. So I took the knife out of here. I took the dagger out of here and I put this in here. But I also started putting all these other treasures. You ready? Here's some of my favorites. Check this out. These are the ones I found. This is an actual, let's see if I can get the light right. Oh, it's not going to be as beautiful as I want it to be. See, there is a sapphire. Oh, it's less pretty than I'd hoped. There you go. You can see it a little bit. This has more of a ruby too. Oh, it's not as pretty as I'd hoped. There you go. You can see it a little bit. I tumbled this one too. But anyways, it's got a little bit of the blue sapphire turquoise thing going on in there. Oh, there you go. You can see it a little bit. One of my favorite little treasures that I found. Anyways, the only clear ones. I found 2 clear ones. Ah! Don't worry. There was this prayer I had all my life that I'm like, someday, Father, you'll let me find a ruby, a pigeon blood ruby that's the size of my fist, and I will be rich, but you will be the one who made me rich, that no man made me rich. You know, this is another one that's kind of clear. That's the clearest one I found. Anyways, some of you guys that are into actual gems, you're like, those are not even gem quality. Well, you go find your own. Go find your own. It's stinking hard. I have to drag around an entire family every time I do it. Ridiculous adventures. Topaz, these ones are better. These ones are nicer. See, they're pretty clear. They're beautiful. I love them. Anyways, just for reference, so you understand something, when Yahuwah is talking about like sapphire covenants, sapphire stones, he's talking about crystal rock that is super hard, like the hardest stone. Diamond is technically a little bit harder, but there's surfaces of sapphires that are just as hard as diamonds, which is amazing. I also have in here a little history about ancient coins, denarius, and the destruction of our dollar, right? This is how currencies over time went from pure materials, like this is pure copper, bronze. Some of these denarius as a day's wages went from being silver, and then they started, taking a little bit of the silver out of there, like the colonialist. Here's one. There it is. The Queen of Beasts. That's her title, not mine. It's her title. Look up the kilogram coin of the Queen of Beasts. She reigned supremely over all the beasts. She even took heraldry and ownership of it all. It's Queen England. Anyway, so this is pure 999 fine silver. Triple nines? Let's see. Triple nines. No, yeah, triple nines fine silver. They would take this and then slowly start incrementing, like decreasing little amounts of the quality of the precious metals that were in here, right? Devaluing their currency. It's because people are doing the dirty things known as debt, tricksters, fraudsters, that kind of stuff. Anyways, Yahuwah literally has this beautiful, precious pavework stones of sapphire underneath his feet. And from there, he has him cut tablets of stone out of that. With his own finger, Yahuwah inscribes the 10 commandments into that. The literal words of his covenant. Do these things and you shall live, right? I am. The first commandment starts with this. I am Yahuwah, your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim, misery, bondage, Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Let me go there. I'm going to go back just a page. I don't want to read it from this one because it's just utterly confusing. I don't like the confusion. Let's jump over. I'm just going to read it to you guys because it's going to get us to our treasure hunt and why the oldest copy of the oldest stone copy of the 10 Commandments that exists is in New Mexico. Yep, because this is the old world. Hey, guess where horses came from? America. Guess where camels came from? America. Guess where the oldest mummies ever discovered are from? America. Guess where tons and literally endless vast quantities of pyramids are found? America. Hey, guess where red-haired giants are found? America. Anyways, I'm going to get lost in it. I don't mean to be condescending, you guys. I deal with liars on an ongoing, never-ending basis. And so when I find authenticity to true history, I'm like, oh, finally it makes sense. Finally, I'm not being lied to. Anyways, you ready for this? Exodus 20. And Elohim's, this is the translation I'm reading from. So much more readable. I understand there's valuable things in the Old English. I get it. It's hard for me to get people to read a basic book. Most people have been brainwashed to third grade reading levels. It's really hard for me to try to teach them Elizabethan English at the same time. This was the text that I chose to do the entire recording of the audio scriptures for a reason. These people weren't corrupt and ruinous like a lot of the other restored names translators out there. Not a lot, just some, like Hallelujah Scriptures. But thankfully, Yahuwah has been very good to provide and watch over his word and make sure that not everyone running the show is corrupt and stealing from their neighbors. Check this out. And Elohim spoke all these words, saying, I am Yahuwah, your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim, out of the house of slavery. You have no other mighty ones against my face. You do not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of that which is in the heavens above, or which is in the earth beneath, or which is in the waters under the earth. You do not bow down to them, nor serve them. For I, Yahuwah, your Elohim, am a jealous El, visiting the crookedness of the fathers on the children to the third and fourth generations of those who hate me, but showing loving commitment to thousands to those who love me and guard my commands. About love and guarding. Love and guarding. Love is guarding. Guarding is love. They're interchangeable. If you have a shepherd who guards his flock and does not love his flock, we got a problem. We got a shepherd who loves his flock but won't guard his flock. We got a different problem. And this is the root cause of all things going wrong with the world. We got a bunch of men who don't know how to love. We also have a bunch of men who don't know how to guard. And it's very hard to find a matured man who loves and guards in equal portions. I'm still working on it. I get a little bit too guarding sometimes and a lot less loving at times. There's times when I get a little lovey, and it's rare. It's rare I get too loving. That's why I have my wife. She's the other half of my love. She pours on the extra love. Can you bring the squirrel over here? See, she's nurturing. She prayed to Yahuwah. She prayed to Yahuwah to bring her a tiny creature to nurse to health. She's like, I'm only nursing 2 babies. I only like raising up 2 baby twins right now. I need something else to nurture. She's such a nurturer. Every time she says, I've got to feed the squirrel, I laugh ridiculously. Come here. This is Arthur. This is Arthur. This is Arthur, the mighty squirrel. He's amazing. He was literally stumbled up upon just literally like my wife's feet. She almost stepped on him. I was like, Chelsea, there's a squirrel. There's a squirrel. There's a squirrel.
He's going to nest in your hair.
He will. Probably. He loves to go in my armpit.
All right, I'm going to feed him.
He's in my hair.
He's wonderful. Let's see. Here.
They want to see you, Arthur.
You're wonderful. Come here.
They want to see you. Go show yourself.
There you go. Anyways, I was like, Chelsea, a squirrel. A baby squirrel's right by your foot. You're going to step on him. She picked him up. She's like, oh my gosh. He was very dehydrated. He was extremely weak and having a hard time. But now he is full of vigor and hickory and hazelnuts and walnuts and Chelsea's raw milk. Straight down the armpit. Oh! It's a unique feeling, y'all. He's down the armpit. Get out of there. Right. That's enough. That's quite enough. That's a private zone, son. Get out of there. Anyways, that's the Reynolds. There's my nurturer. She helps me balance the love approach. I help her balance the sword approach. All right. You ready for this? Verse 7. You do not bring the name of Yahuwah, your Elohim, to vanity. For Yahuwah does not leave the one unpunished who brings his name to naught, to vanity, to ruin, right? My contention is the people doing this kind of crap who are like, here, that's the temple of Yah, that tiny little rectangle in the wilderness. That's it. That's bringing his name to vanity. They're like, yeah, that's what you get. To me, that's bringing his name to vanity. You're taking his name and you're applying it to something that has nothing to do with him. And then you're saying, that's him. That's him. That's like masquerading Christians going around committing horrific atrocities and brainwashing people to make it forbidden for them to speak their native tongue. They're like, we're going to cut your hair off. We're going to drag you into our boarding school. We're going to cut your hair off. We are going to make it illegal for you to speak your name. You're not going to be allowed to speak your father's name, your sister's name. You're not going to be able to preserve the history of your people, your culture, your language, your feast days, your festivals, your Sabbaths. You're not allowed to do any of that. We will execute you in horrific, torturous ways if you will not conform, compromise, memorize lies, and obey us, right? This pattern has been repeated by the parasites of empires forever. The big problem I have is when people do that in the name of Yahuwah, right? In the name of God or in the name of Jesus, right? When I read The Discovery and Conquest of Mexico by Bernal de Cortez Castillo, man, I get that name wrong a little bit. Either way, it's in my recommended reading section. You guys, all the books I recommend for reading and stuff that's gotten me to this place in my life are on my website, snatchedfromtheflames.com, under the resources tab. All of them are organized, botany, zoology, cryptids, mind control, government-sponsored conspiracies, all that stuff. Biblical research and archaeology, all the stuff. It's there. I abhor when people take the name of Yahuwah and then go and commit these atrocities and these horrible dealings. That's when I have a super serious problem. That's when somebody rises to the top of Nathan's list. You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, you know what? You've earned a little extra time and attention. What could go wrong? It's abhorrent. It's radical evil masquerading as good. It's like sheep, dead, skinned, wolf wearing the sheep hide, masquerading as the shepherd, infiltrating the flock. That guy deserves to have his femoral artery severed and for all of his life to drain out very rapidly. That's what you should do with people like that. I actually mean that. Like, that's what needs to happen to people like that, because they're taking Yahuwah's name in vain, and Yahuwah will not leave him guiltless, unpunished. Those that bring his name to naught, they're going to die, every one of them, in horrific and violent and hopefully catastrophically memorable ways, so that people don't go back into the land of foolishness and repeat that mistake again. Anyways, pray for their hearts to stop. You can just do it all through prayer, and pray for those guys that use the blades to use it effectively. Remember the Sabbath day to set it apart. 6 days you labor and shall do all your work. But the seventh day is a Shabbat, a Sabbath of Yahuwah your Elohim. You do not do any work, you nor your son, nor your servant, nor your daughter, nor your female servant, nor your cattle, nor your sojourner who is within your gates. For in 6 days Yahuwah made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested the seventh day. Therefore Yahuwah blessed the Sabbath day and set it apart. Hey, this is one of the most effective tools in the entire arsenal of your kit. And of course, the parasites, right? The masquerading wolves who are running most people's churches and congregations and doctrines are like, let's change that. Let's venerate the day of the sun. Let's give them the first day of the week for their seventh day of the week. And then we'll call it Sabbath. even though it's not Sabbath. And every time they worship on the Sabbath, you know what they'll get? A little bit of obedience to the Pope. Serpent eaters. That's what these people are, you guys. You're submitting to a system that was designed by your enemies to control you and rule over you and spiritually dominate you. It's like worshiping on the Sunday. You're like, you don't think about it as much. And you're like, it's not what it means to me. Yahuwah doesn't care what it means to you. Like, it's irrelevant what it means to you. You're like, in your heart is desperately wicked, full of rottenness poison. The heart is desperately wicked, you guys, full of worthless things. Foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child. The rod of correction, discipline, will bring it out of him. It's true. You don't got it. I don't even have to teach Big Thunder to smash Pearl, his sister's head on. He just loves to beat on her sometimes. Just go and he just jumps on top of her and just wails on her. I'm like, I didn't have to teach him that. You know, I didn't have to teach him to go steal things from each other. I didn't have to teach them to be liars. Like, it's bound up in there, son. It's coming out of them. You know, you have to train that out of them. Okay. Same for you guys. You're like, your heart's deceitful and you're going to justify your way out of a paper bag, you know, but the pagan holidays and not keeping the Sabbath are like fundamental problems. He gave us feast days and Sabbaths. They're weapons in our arsenal. When we walk in those things and we obey his words, like these instructions, bro, we get blessings, and it's a hedge of protection that literally blesses us and walks over us. I'm not talking about salvation. Either way, you still have to believe a commandment. You still have to obey a commandment in order to receive salvation. You know what that commandment is? You shall believe on the name of Yeshua, the Messiah, Jesus of Nazareth, and you shall be saved, delivered, right? That's a fundamental thing. Obedience required for you to enter into salvation. That's serious. I know some of you guys are like, no, you don't have to obey anything after that. You do if you want to be in a covenant with him. Like, just like my wife and I's marriage wants to thrive, like, we should love and respect each other and not do everything each other hates. That would be a problem. But a lot of you receive the traditions of our fathers, which are filled with pagan, horrible things that the Father hates. He's like, don't eat blood. Don't. And we're all like, yeah, well, fine. I don't eat pork. We're like, but I love my bacon. You're like, yeah, you love it more than him because God is your stomach. Super offensive. It's in the Bible. Read it for yourself. Something to consider. Anyways, respect your father and your mother so that your days are prolonged upon the soil which Yahuwah your Elohim is giving you. You do not murder. You do not commit adultery. You do not steal. You do not bear false witness against your neighbor. You do not covet your neighbor's house. You do not covet your neighbor's wife, nor his male servant, nor his female servant, nor his ox, nor his donkey, or whatever belongs to your neighbor. And all the people saw the thunders, the lightning flashes, the voice of the shofar, the mountains smoking, and the people saw it, and they trembled and stood at a distance and said to Moshe, You speak with us and we hear, but let not Elohim speak with us, lest we die. And Moshe said to the people, Do not fear. That's Al-Tira. For Elohim has come to prove you, and in order that his fear be before you, so that you do not sin. So the people stood at a distance, but Moshe drew near the thick darkness where Elohim was. And Yahuwah said to Moshe, Say this to the children of Israel. You yourselves have seen that I have spoken to you from the heavens. You do not make besides me mighty ones of silver. You do not make mighty ones of gold for yourselves. Make a slaughter place of earth for me, and you shall slaughter on it your ascending offerings and your peace offerings, your sheep and your cattle. In every place where I cause my name to be remembered, I shall come to you and bless you. And if you make me a slaughter place of stone, do not build it of cut stone, for if you use your chisel on it, you have profaned it. Nor do you go up by steps to my slaughter place, lest your nakedness be exposed. Super clear instructions then follow from there. These were the words that first got my attention when I was like, okay, somewhere out there in the world, actually in the world, are sapphire tablets that have the handwriting from Yahuwah of the 10 Commandments. Like, they're actual physical artifacts that are in existence, in reality, in this plane that we live in, where we can find these things. So ever since I was little, because what happened is Moses takes these tablets, okay? First time he comes back down off the mountain, people, the Star of Remphan people, those hexagonal worshipers of pagan ideologies. You guys, the Star of Israel, you call it the Star of David, came from the Zionistic conference in the 1800s. It did not come from reliable historical narratives and texts. The imagery, the iconography of idolatry has been around with mystical societies forever, okay? Hexagons and invocations for magical practices been around a long time. Yahuwah does not have a Star of David. You're not going to find it. I'm sorry. I know some of you are diehard in the wool people that love and believe in these things. The problem is you just don't have a basis in reality of where these things come from. You don't know their origin stories. So it would behoove you to spend some time studying the Zionistic movement and where those charged objects, where people began to bring the incantations of mysticism into the forefront for the forms of weaponizing occult psychology, right? This is how to use occult imagery to supercharge an item so that then it can be weaponized against the others in psychological warfare, right? You can put up a blue and white sign now with a hexagon with a hex on it, and people know who you're talking about. It invokes a response in people, a very visceral one, right? That's magic. Okay. Yahuwah was not about the signs and the symbol style of things. That's the other side. That's the kingdom of the fallen ones. That's how they communicate. That's their stars and sigil magic, right? That's what's going on there, you guys. Anyways, if any symbol of any kind is actually there for us to utilize, it would be the menorah, right? This would be literally like an almond tree with branches and bowls, right? 22 bowls, very important for like 22 letters of the alphabet, 12 lights burning on it, beautiful thing. Looked like a tree though. Didn't look like a hex, not the symbol of Israel. Never was. Anyways, they had the Star of Rempam in the Tabernacle of Moses. And while Moses is up there, they just agreed to this covenantal agreement with the Father. And then they're like, you know what? A bunch of people are still liking to drink blood and sacrifice their children and do all kinds of disgusting idolatry and adulterous acts. And they're very persuasive and they have lots of money and influence. And they're like, hey, Aaron, yo, bro, we should totally make some calves and then just get rowdy, rabble-rousing, and get into crazy orgies all over the place while Moses is up there, because he's probably dead anyways. We may as well have a great time and make an idol and say, this is the Elohim who brought us up. And so they do. They do that while Moses is getting these commandments, while he's getting these fine instructions for the tabernacle, all this stuff. Anyways, they're playing the harlot. Like they're literally doing the red light district stuff. It says they rose up to play in the King James Version. They got drunk, rose up to play. That's another way of talking about like disgusting ritualistic magic, gross stuff like Baal Peor, Numbers 22 through 25. Nasty stuff. That's what they were doing while Moses is up there. This is supposed to be the wedding night, like the 40 days of kind of the consummation of the marriage. That time frame was supposed to be this wonderful, beautiful ceremony, and instead they're literally yoking themselves to other gods while they just agreed to the terms and conditions of the covenant. It's a super frustrating thing. Anyway, so Moses comes down off the mountain, and he is ticked. Joshua is like, Moses, bro, it sounds like there's war in the camp. I think people are fighting. And he's like, that's not the sound of a war. That's a bunch of naughtiness that's going on down there. Moses is ticked. He gets down off the mountain and he takes those tablets, those sapphire tablets, and he's like, no! And he throws them down, right? And then he calls the Levites. He's like, get your swords. I love the non-pacifistic book of the Bible. Get your swords. Levites, go cut down all the people who have done these wicked things, right? And they kill 3,000 of them. Stinking cut them to pieces. Hallelujah. Glory to Yah. I love it when righteous men cut wicked down. It's beautiful. You guys, if you haven't seen evil face to face, you don't know. I pray Yahuwah opens your eyes to understanding why the wicked do need to be cut down. So he cuts them down. They all get cut down. It's a bloodbath. Then he takes the gold from that ridiculous, horrible idolatry, right? He cuts it down, chops it up, grinds it into a powder, pours it into the spring that's flowing out of the base of the mountain, right? Pours it into there, makes the people drink their iniquities, right? Dude, that's sick. That's savage. That's brutal, right? These people literally drank their idolatry down. They're like, you're going to drink it. You're going to literally eat your idols. That sucks. That's a crazy, brutal story, but it's there for a reason. It's like a witness to us that like, let's not go down that road. Right. So after that, there's some repentance, understandable. People screwed up. Yahuwah has grace and mercy, and he is loving commitment is wonderful. He gives them an opportunity for another go around the mountain. Moses goes back up the mountain, some more sapphire tablets, cuts them, the finger of Elohim. He comes down, he's got these tablets, and he puts them in a box that he creates called an ark, the Ark of the Covenant, like we think about. Beautiful throne, literal throne, where Yahuwah, really Yeshua, the Word made flesh, would sit and talk to Moses from the mercy seat. He would sit down, put his feet up, and talk to him. Stinking awesome. The Bible's way more fun than anyone told you. Crazy story. But this is what led me on this treasure hunt since I was a little boy. The first time I read that story, I was like, well, that means there's the tablets with the fingerprints of the Most High on them, on the earth somewhere, broken into pieces. And to me, that's the most ultimate treasure hunt that ever could be, is finding the tablets of the covenant. Like if I could find the sapphire stones written by the finger of Elohim, it would be the greatest artifact single hand we could ever have. You know, it would be like literally the most important things we could ever find is the fingerprints of our creator in stone. And this is like when I was little, I was growing up in this area, Flagstaff, Arizona, and there was petroglyphs all around me, all the time. I could climb up in the mountain. This is a mount. What is that place called? Mount Humphreys. Okay. Mount Humphreys has caves and ruins all over it where people have been living forever. And there's petroglyphs on there that you could see with your plain eyes. And you could find pottery shards. One of my buddy and I, we totally found a bunch of pottery. It was awesome. It was like my dream come true. It was a big bowl that had been broken and it had black paint. It predominantly lines, like horizontal lines going around it. It was beautiful. And like him and his dad worked really hard to kind of glue it back together. But these shards of pottery with these little black lettering ink on it just changed my life forever. And I was like, I want to find this stuff so bad. Like I want to find the fingerprints of my creator all over his creation. And it's been a giant cry of my heart my entire life. It's like, we could find it. If we could find that, we would know for certain this is Mount Sinai. Not only that, we would know for certain the Bible is a reliable historical text. Like invaluable things to go down the archaeological road. Anyways, enter the story of meeting some random Canadians. Shout out to you, Blaze. I freaking love you, brother. You're a warrior of the Most High. There's a guy who's raising up his family as a great shepherd and wading through the wars of nightmares because Canada is savage against people of righteousness. I love you guys in Canada. I really do. I pray that Yahuwah has mercy and cuts down your leaders of nightmares. He would just end them for you, and you guys could have freedom again. But you got to go purge the evil from your midst. Something to consider. Anyways, this book, he ended up stopping at this place in New Mexico. It's next to a trash heap. Shocker, because they hate people knowing anything about the real history of the world that's related to the Hebrews. The single most persecuted people on the face of the world in entirety has been the people that preserved and carried the feast days, the Sabbaths, the name of Yahuwah Elohim Sevaoth, or his son, Yeshua, and any of the works of that kingdom. That's who gets hunted down the most. So there's this place in New Mexico, which has the oldest copy of the stone of the Ten Commandments, and it's called the Decalog stone in modern nomenclature. This is the 4th edition by David Deal. David Deal. Absolutely amazing. On the right bank of the Rio Puerco, some 30 miles southwest of Albuquerque, the brown, barren waste of Valencia County, New Mexico, stands a volcanic mesa. The people in the general area called it Hidden Mountain or Mystery Mountain, but the Indians retain its more ancient title, Cerro Los Moquinos, the Cliff of Strange Writings. These names aptly apply, for upon its slopes a secret is revealed that, if accepted, would change the basic concepts upon which ancient American history is built. Few even dare its challenge. Nevertheless, emerging evidence compels us to conclude that this wilderness region was in ancient times visited by adventurers from the Middle East. The paragraph above is the author's introduction to this book, which describes the exciting results of his years of study and research into the Hidden Mountain area. His conclusions, considered highly controversial in some quarters, are nevertheless, if true, of tremendous importance. He is thoroughly convinced that America, possibly as long ago as 3,500 years ago, was once occupied by Hebrew mariners who left their mark with an inscription of the 10 Commandments. So not only is there a copy, this is a black and white book. There's better pictures today. Unfortunately, because it was not guarded and protected, we've had a lot of people deface the stone and literally plot out, guess what? The first commandment. Shocker. And this is, we'll go to this one. You guys can get a better idea. Okay, there you go. That's the literal Decalog stone. That's the line-by-line inscriptions that are written thereon. Nowadays, this top line has been literally pecked out, scratched out. You know, there's people who hate Yahuwah's word. There's a reason everybody goes after like people that have Christian values. Not even that, just like scriptural values. There's a reason people hate the name of Jesus, hate the name of Yeshua. They hate it. You know, it's because all the principalities of the 70 principalities that rule against the nations, they don't want the Most High to have his kingdom prosper. Anyways, there's a small non-bearded man. Check this out. Who's at the top of it? It says the small bearded man petroglyph, notably in the Shemitic prayer stance. This is the hay, Paleo Hebrew, like the literal symbol. It's the hay. This is literally like the letter He, but it's also a way of like worshiping the Most High. You know, men, you're commanded to lift up your hands in prayer. Something to consider. Small bearded man petroglyph, notably in the Shemitic prayer stance with solar eclipse on his right hand. This petroglyph is to be found on the southern part of the eastern rim of Hidden Mountain. If one were to face the petroglyph and look straight ahead, he would see the portion of the sky where the eclipse occurred. This design gives strong evidence that the people involved in the construction on the mountain were not Native American types. Native Americans did not possess beards. And what he's referring to is not only is there a copy of the 10 Commandments that's engraved in stone as you begin to walk up this mountain, it was a fortification. It's an encampment. Okay, let me just go back here. There's also on this mountain an inscription of a star chart, a sky map. Okay, there's a sky map that literally was written, okay, or excuse me, engraved on the stone, and this is them calibrating it because they were able to determine the date of when this stone was engraved. And you know what that date was? September 15th, 10C BC. 107 years before the time of Messiah was the inscription of this eclipse noted on that rock, which means this engraving in this military encampment of what actually was built here on Hidden Mountain at that time, or the Cliff Strange Writings Mountain. That's a better depiction of the star chart there for you. Unfortunately, a lot of this has been broken off and cast aside like people have done with the Torah. You know, this is what he had. And I think most of these pictures are from his 19... There's earlier engravings of this in the 1900s where people came and took copies of it. But the name of Yahuwah. And then he is mirroring that with Dead Sea Scrolls, stuff that confirmed a lot of the epigraphy of what was used in here, that it's not some Mormon forgery. This stuff's been around a long time. But either way, this mountain, this single, just one mountain over in New Mexico bears witness. Oh, this is the one I love. Check this out, you guys. Ready? As is readily seen, I'll let you see it. Okay. All right here. This is like Paleo Hebrew. Okay. Aleph, Lamed. Sorry, it's hard to do inverse. Okay. As is already seen, the letter style is identical to that inscription of the inscription rock located further down the mountainside. Individuals of more recent times have seen fit to immortalize themselves upon the same boulder, printing their names beside and all around the ancient letters. This practice may have well served to preserve the inscription, acting as sort of a camouflage, interpreted as nothing more than the thoughtless scratchings. The latter-day Kilroys have bypassed and not defaced it. The phrase which is read from right to left is rendered in the modern Hebrew as Yahuwah Eloheinu, which translates to Yahweh is our mighty one. Y'all, thousands of years ago, there were people observing the feast days, like around Sukkot, right? The fall feast times on this mountain, who were Hebrews, Israelites, okay? Living here in America, engraving in stone the commandments, taking time to memorialize the words of their father. But that's not like the only place in the Americas where you find ancient Hebrew. Okay, you know who that is? A Levite priest, y'all. You see all that inscriptions? That's Hebrew. Okay, the name of Yahuwah above it. Do you know where this one was found? Stinking America. Some of the best Hebrew artifacts that have ever been found were found here in America. Some of the highest concentrations of ancient Hebrew are found here in America. Unfortunately, it does not fit the narrative that they were trying to push at the time, which was what's called manifest destiny. This is very important. They wanted to convince people, the kind of the new invading force, right? The colonizers. They bring in the people, and they're like, you're now going to be the ones who are going to steward this land for us and be our servants here, the colonialists. They're like, the first people that went into the Americas in a lot of ways, the modern Europeans, right? They came in a few different routes, right? The Spaniards came up from the south and they invaded most of the south. The huge swaths of America used to be called New Spain. They used to be a colony of Spain. Other parts of America were a colony of Britain, right? Other parts were colonies of France. This is very important. The America map that you and I think of today is not consistent with the one that had been through history and through time, nor is the narrative about how we got to where we are consistent or accurate. But back at the time, they wanted to give people propaganda, right? promises about like a way to persuade people to believe that the Indians were savages who did not have writing, who did not have culture, and therefore we could dehumanize them and make us take their lands and slaughter and butcher them. So they had to go physically and destroy and deface and wipe out much of the evidence of the advanced civilizations that have been here for thousands of years. So it was a very systemic, hard project to go across the entirety of the Americas and eradicate anything that showed evidence of this old world history, including transatlantic travel. Okay. This area, sorry, I'll read this one on just this stone. Many of these were preserved, others of which that were found and documented by folks over at the Smithsonian. Okay, here's an incredible book that I have lent to me for a brief period of time because it's very valuable and not easy to find. This comes from the Smithsonian. Okay, this is from the Astor House, the Astor family. Understand that there was history that was given to the intelligentsia, right? The rulers, or maybe what another word for them is called not Manchurians, excuse me. Manchurians is a whole other thing. These would be the people that are the part of the Mandarin class, the governors of society. They were given books. They were given resources that were not made available to the general public. One of the main ways they made it not available to the public was simply its costs and its exclusivity. This is one of those books. This is actually a book that was dedicated and given to Professor John Locke. He's a very important figure in our history. Check this out. Hey, if any of you have ancient, interesting books or artifacts you want to send my way that I could use in my research or endeavors, I would most appreciate it. Even if it's on Lend, you can just let me know. Anyways, this is one of those areas. So here you go. The Smithsonian Institute. I really need a book cam. It's going to be great. Oh, sorry. Sorry, guys. Hang in there. Got to be delicate with this thing. Here you go. I'm going to read it to you because you may not be able to see it. The Smithsonian Institution, having printed an edition of the following memoir for distribution, permit the authors to strike off from the same type and plates a small edition for their own benefit. Joseph Henry, Secretary of the Smithsonian Institution, Washington, September 1948. This book is called The Ancient Monuments. It has beautiful copper plate, wood engravings. This is kind of what was utilized to show people what was found here. Some of it that fit the narrative that was going to be built out. This was going to be the narrative that would be passed along through archaeological artifacts as well as through historical books. But understand that that narrative changes a lot. Like in 1924, the British Empire worked very diligently through tax-exempt foundations to change the narrative of our education system to make Americans love the British Empire again. They're like, we need to take America and make them to come back to our side. We need to recolonize America and take over America so that we can rule the entirety of the world from sea to shining sea, right? They rose up from the Astor Sea. The colonialists want the Americas back. So they started changing our textbooks. They started changing our stories. They started highlighting British and American ally work so that we would all work together instead of understanding that like we should fight very hard to purge the evil from our midst, you know? Anyways, side note, Nicaragua purged the Jesuits from their midst and took over and seized all their assets. Hallelujah, glory to Yah. Pray for the day where secret societies are purged from our midst. This volume is intended to form the first of a series of volumes consisting of original memoirs on different branches of knowledge published at the expense and under the direction of the Smithsonian Institution. The publication of this series forms part of a general plan. Conspiracy. Check this out. A general plan adopted for carrying into effect the benevolent intentions of James Smithson, Esq. of England. So here, in their own words, y'all, a conspiracy is afoot from the British Empire to establish a narrative for what America is and who the historical people of America are and how we are going to bring that message to the masses. This is from their own stinking words, you guys. This is why books are awesome. Because if I go online and I try to search what's the history of the Smithsonian Institution, what's their agenda, who are the people who financed and facilitated its cultivation and its dominance as the authority on history. Well, we find them dang roots of them parasites. This gentleman left his property in trust to the United States of America to found at Washington an institution which should bear his own name and have for its objects, quote, the increase and diffusion of knowledge among men, end quote. This trust was accepted by the government of the United States as an act of Congress passed on August 10th, 1846, constituting the president and the other principal executive officers of the general government, the chief justice of the Supreme Court, the mayor of Washington, and such other persons as they might elect honorary members, an establishment under the name, quote, Smithsonian Institution for the Increase and Diffusion of Knowledge Among Men, end quote. The members and honorary members of this establishment are to hold stated and special meetings for the supervision of the affairs of the institution and for the advice and instruction of a board of regents to whom the financial and other affairs are entrusted. The board of regents consists of 3 members ex officio of the establishment, namely the vice president of the United States, the chief justice of the Supreme Court, and the mayor of Washington, together with 12 other members, 3 of whom are appointed by the Senate for its own body, 3 by the House of Representatives from its members, and 6 citizens appointed by a joint resolution of both houses. To this board is given the power of electing a secretary and other officers for conducting the activities, the active operations of the institution. Capital institution. To carry into effect the purposes of the testator, the plan of organization should evidently embrace 2 objects. 1, the increase of knowledge by the addition of new truths to the existing stock. The other, the diffusion of knowledge thus increased among men. No restriction is made in favor of any kind of knowledge, and hence each branch is entitled to and should receive a share of attention. Understand something. The new truths that you see there to the existing stock, right? These new truths are the new narratives, okay? My contention is that there was a unleashing of the Watchers. This is the specific entities, the immortals, that were released in the 19th century progressively, because there's 70 generations of judgment. There's 70 generations of which their prison sentences were when they were locked up in chains of darkness and held in Tartarus, right? The deepest bowels of the earth, the prison cells of the earth. In the first Enoch, book of First Enoch, for what it's worth, he was given a prison sentence. When they were let out, many of these agendas of these narratives from the 1800s to modernity, we start to see them play out. And you start to see different houses be established, different dominions, different thrones, different governing powers, like the Geneva Bible in Ephesians 6:12. Most of us have heard the passage about Ephesians 6, right? Having finally be strong in Yahuwah. I'm going to read it right here because it's pulled up. Go figure. This is what I was working on 2 days ago. Circled back around. Finally, be strong in Yahuwah and in the strength of his might. Put on the whole armor of Elohim, that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For our wrestling is not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against the powers, against the world's rulers of the darkness of this age, and against the spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places. Therefore, put on the whole armor of Elohim, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day. And having done all to stand, therefore, having the utility belt of truth buckled around your waist, and having put on the breastplate of righteousness, and having fitted your feet with the preparation of the good news of shalom. That means no chaos, no confusion, peace. And above all, taking up the shield of faith with which you will be able to quench all the fiery darts of the evil one, and take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of Elohim, with all prayers and requests, praying at all times in the Spirit, and being watchful to this end, in all perseverance and requests of my holy ones. On my behalf, that utterance may be given to me in the opening of my mouth, to make known with boldness the mystery of the good news, for which I am an ambassador in chains, that I may speak boldly as I ought to speak. Okay, that's the text. That's from what's called the Hebrew Names Version of the Bible. That's a translation, right? Well, if you go to the King James Bible, most of us have read iterations from the Masoretic text of the King James Bible that did not come from the Septuagint, right? Different manuscripts. The King James Bible talks about principalities, powers, rulers, thrones, dominions, right? Spiritual wickedness in high places when it talks about the hierarchy of the spiritual powers, the immortals. Okay. But the Geneva Bible, just a little bit before it, right, talked about the governors of power, like governors of power in places of power in that same little section against the powers, against the world's rulers of darkness. They're talking about the actual leadership of the world. Like the actual governors are named, like the parasites. They're like, those guys are some of the tyrants, you know? Like I'm really interested in something called tyrannicide. I love that. It's my favorite new species of words. It's about people who kill tyrants. My favorite kind of people. I love that. It's something I long and pray that Yahuwah would raise up more of. Tyrannicidists. Anyways, that's what he's describing in there. Like literally the tyrants who rule the world. These are people who we are literally getting to read their texts from their own words, their tyrannical doctrines of how they were going to change the narrative to fit what they wanted to put out. And a lot of this comes through evolutionary Darwinianism, right? It also came through Spiritism. It came through the destruction of man and women and our relationship through marriage and the family home and the education system and literacy rates, like all these various different agendas that came out in order to bolster up something called eugenics, right? Social utopianism, a lot of these different colonnades that they were going to use to build their new temple, the temple to the new man for the age of reenchantment. Gosh, dang it, I love this book. Every time. Carl Tykereb, stinking slayer of Sisera, Jael level savagery in this book. The Game of Gods, the Temple of Man in the Age of Reenchantment. Well, with your study. Anyways, I'm getting lost in the weeds here. But understand, this then goes through a lot of those dictations. Yah willing, I will be able to scan in a lot of these documents for you guys and make them available so you guys can read them. If some of you might even already know, this one may be available online and I don't even know it. It's the first time I've ever seen it, though. So it came across my page. But they go through breaking down the details of the first part of the plan and then the second part of the plan, right? The first one, which was to increase knowledge. It is proposed to stimulate research by offering rewards consisting of money, medals, etc., for original memoirs on all subjects of investigation. Part 2 was to increase knowledge. It is also proposed to appropriate a portion of the income annually to special objects of research under the direction of suitable persons. Number 3, let's see, 3. This is under the same thing. To diffuse knowledge. It is proposed to publish a series of reports giving an account of the new discoveries in science and of the changes made from year to year in all branches of knowledge and not strictly professional. So understand something here, you guys. The Smithsonian was going to literally be a shot-calling organization for the narrative that was run by the president, the vice president of the United States, the Supreme Court Justice of the United States, members of Congress, members of the, let's go back for a second, the House of Representatives and the Senate, and 6 citizens, under which they would elect a secretary. The secretary at this time, which I believe is the first secretary, his name is James. We had it for a second there, very briefly. Oof. Very delicate book. Need to be careful here. Dang, I could just read through the entirety of this. Maybe what I'm going to do, you guys, is just try to scan in some of these pictures for you because this is just beautiful. I'm going to get totally lost in just understanding the nuances here. Oh, there we go. Professor James Henry, Secretary of the Smithsonian Institution. Anyways, the very beginning is quite illustrious as to what is going to take place in the remainder of this book. And I highly recommend you take the time to read things like the introduction to the King James Bible, the 1611 King James Bible, where they venerate and they put on Ascension Pathhood King James, right? They're like, he's basically the God of that Bible. Please, I'm dead serious, you guys. It sounds awkward when I say it out loud like that, but they literally took out the book of Jacob, and they called it the book of Jimmy, the book of James. You know, they're like, you could keep financing us in our translation efforts if we rename the Bible after you. It'll go great, right? People will love it. It'll be great. I'm not digging on the entirety of the King James Bible translation as itself. There's wonderful, incredible tools that are in there. But understand, there was a plethora of other very good translations that were there at the time. The Whitman's Bible. Like there was the Tyndale Bible. There was amazing translations. Most of those people were literally being burned alive with their translations around their necks. But some were selected and venerated as the ultimate one. And that was mass produced in scale. While others were not. They were relegated to obscurity. Like The Scriptures translation that I read from is kind of like that. You know, Yah Scriptures translation, Restored Names translation. These are like relegated to obscurity, whereas others are venerated as the ultimate Bible. The NIV, you know, a thought for thought translation of the Bible, the nearly inerrant version, as we like to call it. I was brainwashed and programmed with the King James version and the NIV version, so I can't even go down that road, you guys. I know there's still wonderful, valuable things, and you can still glean from it incredible pearls of truth and wisdom and knowledge and find redemption and deliverance through those methods. It's just not one I can use. Anyways, in this book, I just want to show you guys some of the complexities of what it was they were trying to push down as the narrative, okay? What you're going to find here is things that fit the narrative about this more or less very... Oh, just look at this. So I got to show you this. It's incredible, okay? Because a lot of what was actually uncovered here was the tops of a society, a very advanced civilization that was basically buried. And all that's left for us to really look at is these things that are just nubs sticking out of the ground. Okay. And it's not been fully excavated. Not all of the mounds and the civilization and stuff was bulldozed and excavated. The vast majority of all of it was. They're like, we're going to turn it into farmland, right? And we're going to go ahead and destroy any evidence of this ancient man. But when people would come across these things, I can't really open this book too much. There's one, right? When they would come across these things, these are the types of remnants of what was left over of that. Okay. Then you have, let's go this way. Then you have the surveyors who work on, you can even see the animal engraved into the ground itself down in there. Oh, these are so good. I've got to figure out how to do this better. I know I'm just giving you guys a teaser view. Ready, aim, fire. Kind of ready, fired, aim today with this book. But I wanted to show you a couple ones in particular. Hold on a second. The sacred enclosures. There's a whole section in here about... let me get there for you. There we go. So you'll see a very common one about the Great Serpent Mound. This is from Adams County, Ohio. This one is still preserved today and can be visited. It's a very supercharged object. Okay, this is from 1848, what they were publishing about it and its artifacts, right? Because we talk about, like, when I say a reference of somebody being a snake eater or a serpent eater, this is the kind of people and the cult and the religious ideology of what I'm talking about. There's people who still carry on this practice of consuming the serpent and eating eggs and hatching eggs. And I'm not talking like theoretical things. I'm talking about they swallow live snakes. They swallow infant snakes, baby snakes, venomous and non-venomous ones, and they literally put them in other orifices of their body. It's disgusting. That's what these people are all into. A bunch of perverts running the world. Anyways, this is the priest class that has been people that practice divination, right? The arts of foretelling, fortune telling. They believe by doing this, it could augment them and make them like these serpents and give them the power and knowledge from the serpent. Okay, let me just read to you their discussion on the Serpent Mound in Ohio from 1848. Probably the most extraordinary earthwork thus far discovered at the West is the Great Serpent, of which a faithful delineation is given in the accompanying plan. It is situated on Brush Creek at a point known as the Three Forks on entry 1014, near the north line of Adams County. No plan or description has hitherto been published, nor does the fact of its existence appear to have been known beyond the secluded vicinity in which it occurs. The notice first received by the authors of these researches was exceedingly vague and indefinite, and led to the conclusion that it was a work of defense, with bastions at regular intervals, a feature so extraordinary as to induce a visit, which resulted in the discovery here presented. The true character of the work was apparent on the first inspection. It is situated upon a high crescent-formed hill or spur of land, rising 150 feet above the level of Brush Creek, which washes at its base. The side of the hill next to the stream presents a perpendicular wall of rock, while the other slopes rapidly, though it is not so steep as to preclude cultivation. The top of the hill is not level but slightly convex, and it presents a very uneven surface, 150 feet wide by 1,000 feet long, measuring from its extremity to the point where it connects with the tableland. Conforming to the curve of the hill and occupying its summit is the serpent, its head resting near the point, and its body winding back for 700 feet, in graceful undulations terminating in a triple coil at the tail. The entire length, if extended, would not be less than 1,000 feet. The accompanying plan, laid down from accurate survey can alone give an adequate conception of the outline of the work, which is clearly and boldly defined. The embankment being upwards of 5 feet in height by 30 feet at the base, at the center of the body, but diminishing somewhat towards the head and the tail. The neck of the serpent is stretched out and slightly curved, and its mouth is opened wide, as if in an act of swallowing or ejecting an oval figure, giving birth to. Understand this. Which rests partially within the distended jaws. The oval is formed by an embankment of earth without any perceptible opening, 4 feet in height, and is perfectly regular in outline. Its transverse and conjugate diameters being 160 and 180 feet respectively. The ground within the oval is slightly elevated. A small circular elevation of large stones, much burned, once existed in its center. Okay, what do you think was happening in the burning stone center of this thing? But they have been thrown down and scattered by ignorant visitors under the prevailing impression that probably gold was hidden beneath them. The point of the hill with which in this egg-shaped figure rests seems to have been artificially cut to conform to its outline, leaving a smooth platform 10 feet wide and somewhat inclining inwards all around it. Upon either side of the serpent's head extend 2 small triangular elevations, 10 or 12 feet over. They are not high. Besides a platform or level oval terrace at B and a large mound in the center is the isthmus connecting the hill with the tableland beyond. There are no other remains excepting a few mounds within 6 or 8 miles, none nearer than the entrenched hill in Highland County. The serpent, separate or in combination with the circle, egg, or globe, has been a predominant symbol among many primitive nations. It's prevailed in Egypt, Greece, and Assyria, and entered widely into the superstitions of the Celts, the Hindus, and the Chinese. It has penetrated into America and was conspicuous in the mythology of the ancient Mexicans, among whom its significance does not seem to have differed materially from what is possessed in the Old World. The fact that ancient Celts and other nations of the Old Continent had erected sacred structures in the form of the serpent is one of high interest. Of this description of the great temple of Arbury in England, in many respects, the most imposing ancient monument of the British Isles. Okay. But it's not just that serpent, all right? That one is famous and known today. However, what you'll find all throughout this book is a plethora of other animals and other types of reptilians and creatures and hybrids and things that are not heretofore mentioned in the common narrative about our past ancestors, and the way that they memorialized, they venerated, the way that they worshipped and built very complex, advanced societies, like incredible societies with earthenworks projects, the likes of which we can still hardly endeavor. Like they augmented and altered the entire coastline of America. Like America has an island defense system, sand barrier island defensive network that surrounds almost the entirety of our country. Unbelievable amounts of geological engineering in order to facilitate the production of this. And yet it's like very, very little discussed about it. Now, here's some more of those little creatures. Check these things out, these massive earthworks. Okay, there's the inverse of them. This is the stuff that they had to go in there and obviously destroy because it lent a lot of insight into how advanced the civilization was that was here beforehand. Okay, when settlers were coming here, homesteaders, right? This is what a lot of what they saw. The Great Plains of the Midwest, in particular, a very flat space. These mounds would be somewhat noticeable, but they're overgrown. Yeah, because after any massive reset, this is how it looks. Oh, here's a better one. But these are the types of artifacts that were utterly expunged. Okay, it's not just like the gravestones. You know, it's like entire city complexes of hundreds of thousands of people that cross-marked and met their way all across the world. Here's a cross-section analysis. So when they cut into one of these, they're showing you. They call them burial mounds. Very few of them were just burial mounds. All right. LiDAR, ground penetrating radar, is a way that they've been able to penetrate the canopy of places all over the world, like in the jungles of the Amazon. Well, out here in the Americas, that same technology has not yet readily been applied to lift off the soil layer and go ahead and examine underneath these. But when they do, what they find in a lot of these buildings and structures is a collapsed dome, is that these were structures, the roof of a structure, a much larger structure underneath it. But that can't fit the narrative that's been put out there for us. So in the 1970s, they literally made it illegal for anybody to dig up, excavate any of this stuff. They're like, we can't have any of this stuff getting out there because it would continue to reveal the false narrative of the history that we've been given, you know? They're like, you're not allowed to dig into any of this stuff. You're not allowed to touch these artifacts. We say it's because we care about the Native Americans now. Not reality. They still don't care about the Native Americans now. They keep them drunk and high all the time. That's the goal. Keep them sick, fat, and nearly dead through terrible food and nutrition and a government stipend every month. It's the stuff that'll kill you. Government welfare, you guys. It's doctrines of Ishtar. You ready for this? Nimrod controlled the world through tyrannical raids, right? He ruled with an iron fist. He forced people into subjugation through fear. Semiramis, his wife, had a different approach. She ruled the nations with love. Okay, her way of controlling the world was through social justice, through social, basically socialism, right? Where people got free food, they got free clothing, they got healthcare, they got all the types of, benefits, governmental benefits and subsidies that they wanted in order to live. She believed that the way that she could rule the world was by stealing their hearts. She followed Absalom followed her practices, right? Jezebel followed those same practices. They ruled the world through controlling people by giving them what they need so that they're dependent on the government class, in order to sustain them and live. That's how tyrants subtly control and rule over a population. It's like, let's use social utopianism ideology to convince people that they can have their cake and eat it too. And we'll give them big bag boogeymans. But there's all kinds of creatures that are in here. Look at these things. They have an entire section in here on pottery and earthworks and ironworks and bronze tools. Amazing. Amazing to get to see some of what's preserved. Look at this stuff. This is all here in the Americas, well preserved. Okay, people that we don't even know about, right? Look at that beauty. Oh, metal. Look at the bronze, baby. Okay, copper tools, right? Because they work savagely well when you're dealing with red-headed giants. Okay, float copper. One of the only places in the world where perfect, pure copper comes to the surface is in northern Michigan. Gosh, I want to go there so bad. If you have any float copper and you want to like hook a brother up, and we can forge some savage tools like this, I want to make some spears for fighting the giants of men. A little more of the tyrannicidal practices. You know what I'm saying? Look at the beauty of these things. Anyways, copper is something that can be melted at a relatively low point and hardened and turned into bronze with not too much work. And is one of the most important tools that were given to them. Anyways, I just wanted to show you some of the smelting practices that they had. I want to break into this whole book. See, there's the priest class. These are their bronze artifacts, Like this book, what you will not find in here is all of the history about, they're going to show you there's these like the Stone Age people, right? The primitive people stuff. This book is going to put forth the narrative that these people were still basically Stone Age, at the most Bronze Age Indian savages. What they're not going to show you is all the artifacts that tell you of a different, totally cultured people. Look at this freak show of a thing. Look at that creature. Come on. Crazy stuff. Crazy stuff. This one will. Two other books I want to draw to your attention to. Okay. America BC. Do you remember how earlier when they were talking about the serpent mound, they're like, yeah, we noticed that this is the same deity that's venerated by the Celts. This is America BC by Barry Fell. One of these studies, you want to talk about okay. This is the engravings of stuff that they find in those mounds. This is all that this goes into, chronicles a lot of what is what's epigraphy, right? Carvings in stone, and how we can track through time who these people actually were because they wrote their languages. And most people just don't know what ogam is, like ogam script was. Okay. But these are artifacts that were uncovered here in the Americas, right? What you'll find in common narratives of things like Celts and Egyptians and Vikings and Nordic people, you're going to find all of these various different inscriptions. They're building their Celtic building power, okay? Because people have been coming over here. The Americas has been a highway to the nations first stinking ever. It was never a lost colony. It was just obfuscated from a lot of certain peoples at different times in order to fit narratives. But this is Phoenician scripts. Here you go. Let me show you one. In Brazil, the discovery of the Pedra Lavrada inscription in Phoenician script engraved on stone occurred in the Paraíba province in Brazil in 1886. A translation by Da Silva Ramos was published in French in 1939. and the following is an English rendering. Let me show you it, by the way. Sorry, this is Phoenician. Understand something? It's going to look a lot like Hebrew. Get what I'm saying here? See the aleph? You'll see the similarities. You'll see a gimel. You'll see a lot of these Phoenician. I call it Phoenician when a lot of it's Hebrew. Okay. This stone monument has been cut by Canaanites of Sidon, who, in order to establish trading stations in distant lands, mountainous and arid, under the protections of the gods and the goddesses, set out on a voyage in the 19th year of the reign of Hiram, which is 536 BC. Our powerful king, they departed from Ashonagabar in the Red Sea after having embarked colonialists in 10 ships, and they sailed, having embarked colonists in 10 ships, they sailed in company along the coast of Africa for 2 years. Subsequently, they became separated from the flagship and carried far away from their companions. 10 men and 3 women arrived here on this unknown coast, of whom I, the unhappy Metu Astarte, servant of the powerful goddess Astarte, have taken possession. May the gods and goddesses come to my aid. This is a carving on stone in stinking Brazil, found in the 1800s, discovered again in the 1800s, relegated out of your textbooks and history books by people like the conspirators of New Truth from the Smithsonian, because this does not fit the narrative. They're like, we can't have people knowing that people have been coming here since 586 BC, But here it is, the servants of Astarte, right? Later on, they came under Spain, servants of Mary, I'm sorry, you guys. Mary is an idol. She's a false goddess, the queen of heaven, who's named in the scriptures as being abhorrent for you to be worshiping with the pressed cakes, eating the cakes to the goddess of heaven. That's Astarte. Same deity, you guys. You're getting caught up in the same stuff. Flee from it. Anyways, this is an amazing little artifact that exists in time and antiquity that you can examine for yourself. But here's another one. He goes into a lot of the Punic and Phoenician inscriptions here. His chapters are delineated on all kinds of them. Hold on a second here. Because you have the Celts. You had the Celts and all kinds of different people coming over here to the Americas for centuries, for millennia. But this type of information did not fit that narrative that, Columbus discovered this place. Nowadays, they're starting to kind of accept the fact that they're like, okay, we'll admit that some of the Vikings came over here before Columbus. We'll admit that, but no more. They're not going to admit that like the Israelite tribes were here dominating the landscapes and that there were people that preserved the name of Yahuwah, like the Cherokee. They literally preserved the festival feast days in the name of our creator. They don't want to go down that road because it's going to be uncomfortable for them to admit that giants really did roam the earth and like the Bible was true, because the narrative has since been for the last couple hundred years that we got to blot out anything that might give credence to the validity or the veracity of the scriptures. Okay. But here, I'm going to just tell you the symbols of sun worship in Europe after the coming of Christianity. The old pagan sun symbols were adopted to serve an acceptable function within the approved canons of the church. Ha! Pagans be all up in your business, church. For the monks were unable to detach the people from their mystic worship of the rotula, left the so-called Celtic cross, exemplified by the ancient cross of Ionia, right, an old Basque tombstone in the French Pyrenees in which the cross formed from 5 sun weeks. Christian missionaries did not reach the New England Celts, so the pagan inscriptions in Ogam and Punic letters have remained intact in their original form. Okay, what's beautiful is he's showing you guys Ogam and Celtic inscriptions that are here in New England, right? Some of these are in Portugal, some of these are new in New England, some of these are in Massachusetts. All over the Americas, you will find these inscriptions in stone, most of which were not left translated because Ogam, the script, had not been deciphered. Let me show you another one here. This is the hinge ogam from, let's see, shown here is a latex mold of Monhegan Island, which is offshore of the coast of Maine. This is a North American example of the ogam script. Okay. I'm going to read it for you. North American example of lapidary inscription in the style of hinge ogam, number 3 of the ogam tract. Shown here as a latex mold collected on Manana Island of Monhegan Island, about 10 miles off the shore of Maine. The variety of ogam, unknown from stones in Ireland or elsewhere in Europe, was once dismissed by scholars as worthless child's play, supposedly the invention of medieval monks. But the American example, lacking vowels and coeval with the Phoenician inscription, shows this alphabet is a Bronze Bronze Age predecessor of the Irish ogam, meaning this is older than the Irish ogam. Do you understand? Predates it. The inscription reads from right to left, LNG BT BFNC CDHHLBD, apparently to be translated as ships from Phoenicia cargo platform. The island having a flat horizontal surface of rock. This inscription is discussed in chapter 8. The occurrence of a supposedly Norse word, langbata, or longboat, parallels other Norse words and personal names found on Celt-Iberian steles and suggests that the Norsemen were aboard long before the Viking Age. Okay, so what happens throughout the history of the course of this book is he goes through all these different artifacts and evidence of his inscriptions in stone that are across the Americas that change the timeline quite drastically of when and who was actually, when people were living here and who those people actually were. One of my favorite books in all time is one to identify in here. Anyways, I'm going to get lost in this stuff. I'm going to have to go, you guys. But this is the other one, Gloria Farley. Okay. Now, she did a lot of her work. This is out. A lot of this covers the eastern half of the United States. Her work covers predominantly the western half of the United States and the inscriptions that are found out there. Let me show you just a couple real quick because I really got to go. Oh, yeah. You're going to find a whole bunch of Moloch. You betcha. You're going to find Moloch. You're going to find Baal. You're going to find Baal Hadad. You're going to find all these various plumed serpents. You're going to find all the same entities and deities that you find in the scriptures. You know, they start talking about these like deities, Zeus, all these other ones, right? You're going to find Mitzrayim engraved in here. You're going to find Zaphnath Paneah, like the name of Joseph, engraved here in the United States. You're going to find elephants, the kinds of African kinds. You can find crocodiles, the stuff in Africa. You know, the stuff that they're like, it's only over there. We promise. You can trust us. Hold on. Let me show you one. You can find people riding horses way before they say that we had horses over here. The Celtic goddess of Eponia. Okay. This is some from Oklahoma. These are literal one-for-one matches of a lot of the same reliefs that are found on the Celtic temples over there. This drooping horse image is a representation of the Celtic goddess Eponia. On his back, as if riding side saddle, was a rider with a round head, upraised arms, and possibly wearing a skirt. Since the figure appears to be female, it's possible that she represents yet another image of Eponia, the Celtic horse goddess. The deity was discussed in the chapter, The Anubis Caves, Discovery and Development. Oh, that's a really good chapter, too. 6-footed giants. She's got a whole section in here on the 6-footed ones. Then, you see this? It's not the Nazis, you guys. It's not the Nazis. Okay? Let me show you this. It's so good. Then be Nephilim over here. You know what I'm saying? These are all these different inscriptions that are found here. This is a great chapter. The 6-toed feet from Colorado. By 1978, petroglyphs and inscriptions in the Oklahoma Panhandle and adjacent Colorado were being seriously recorded. That summer, an exploring party, which included John Schuler, Dale Murphy, and Earl and Margaret Sversen, was taken by a local rancher to a huge boulder lying at the foot of a flat-topped butte in southeastern corner of Colorado. The site was so far off the beaten path that it had no modern graffiti. The boulder was covered with fascinating petroglyphs, pecked into one weathered flat surface. One of the more significant petroglyphs showed the unmistakable image of a ship, which later became the emblem of the Epigraphic Society, as discussed in the chapter, quote, "They came in ships," end quote. Nearby also was inscribed the name of the Egyptian colony, discussed in the chapter, quote, "The Trail of the Egyptians," end quote. Also on the boulder was the image of a 6-toed foot with a narrow heel. 5 toes were long and slender, while the 6th toe was large and rounded. The right foot measured 9 inches in length. To the left, 3 inches, was pecked 6-inch figure of a man. His arms were outflung and his legs were strangely folded, as if he lay dead. His left foot was either missing or hidden behind his right leg. The foot petroglyph was reminiscent of the ones recorded at Roland, Oklahoma, 6 years previous. Becoming aware of the unusual pattern, I began to search for references to 6-toed feet. They were found in illustrations from Cane Creek Canyon in Utah and by the Rio Grande in Rio Arriba County, New Mexico. Robert Wilson of Peoria, Illinois, photographed right and left 6-toed feet that seemed to walk up a wall behind the Pueblo Bonita at Chaco Canyon, New Mexico. It was not yet realized that 6-toed feet existed in Africa as well. In July 1978, I had as a guest Brenda Sullivan of Makawasi, the Republic of South Africa. A mutual friend had found that both of us were recording petroglyphs in our native lands, and strangely, some of them were identical. Although Sullivan was born in South Africa, her accent betrayed that her parents were from Scotland. Sullivan is a very intelligent and charming person, and her letters since the visit have been a joy. During Sullivan's visit, she was taken to petroglyph sites in Oklahoma and Arkansas, but no mention was made of a six-toed feet. At the end of her visit, she referred to Dr. Barry Fell and Norman Totten in Boston, and Dr. Warren Cook and Warren Dexter in Vermont, all of whom she later visited. Sullivan later published an article entitled Ancient Diamond Miners in South Africa. She noted that whenever ancient stone tools were found in the diggings, the miners knew they were of no use to look further for gems. They'd already been mined. In her article, Sullivan included drawings of petroglyphs found in South Africa. One showed the familiar outline of a six-toed foot. The caption explained that similar petroglyphs were found at the other sites. This is important. When asking the meaning of the six-toed foot, Sullivan consulted the Credo Mutwa of Johannesburg. The remarkable man is a witch doctor or shaman of the Zulu tribe. He's an artist, scholar, and author of a book giving a historical account of his people. Matwa graciously permitted Sullivan to tape record his explanation of the origin of the six-toed feet petroglyphs. This tape was heard in February while I was on board a ship floating on the Nile River. The following account is written. The six-toed foot is a symbol of the Zulu sun god. The mythological god had one eye, one ear, one leg, one testicle. The extra toe, which usually stuck out at an angle, represented the testicle. This was always on the right foot, or neutral ambiguous one, but never on the left foot. A succession of men would take their places as the sun god and live in absolute luxury for a short while. For example, the temporary sun god might have 12 wives in 12 months. Then he would be sacrificed for another man to take his place. Those chosen for this honor were usually large men with reddish hair. Giants, red-haired giants. Do you understand what I'm saying here? Because born of a, quote, virgin. That is because the insemination had been done with a feather dipped in semen. Or sometimes the most beautiful youth was captured to become sun god. When a new god was selected, he was put his foot on a stone saying, I take possession. I have arrived. His footprint was engraved and distorted to include the testicle. This was where the sun god breathed his last too, because he was killed ritually. Usually the sun god was caught up in his dreams and believed he was a god. And if he were so inclined, he was given drugs to enhance this belief. At the ritual sacrifice, he was stabbed to death, or sometimes he would be sent to a no-win battle against a warrior armed with an assegai, a metal-tipped spear. But he would have a spear tipped only with an ostrich feather. In that case, the battle site became a sacred place for sick people. When the next sun god came, he would put his foot where previously had stood the sun god and say, I take possession. I have arrived. Although it's not clear from Matoa's words whether the six-toed foot was carved at the coronation site or the sacrificial site, perhaps both. His description brought up the remembrance of a 20-inch long, six-toed right foot outlined at Roland, Oklahoma. Bigfoot people, you should be listening in right now. The big toe certainly stuck out at an angle. The petroglyph from Colorado of the six-toed foot next to the man lying as if dead with one foot hidden or missing was recalled. The little engraving of a man crossed with legs symbolizes a sacrificial sun god about to be burnt on a funeral pile. To this day, some tribes in South Africa still cross the legs of a good person who has laid down his life for her people. So on the return trip, she goes back to this place and documents more of, okay, we have this stub sticking out. Now when you go back, it makes a little bit more sense as to why we have this sixth thing hanging off there, testicle. Because we had literally people worshiping the same deities, the same gods of Egypt and of Africa. Right? Here's the literal name Mitzrayim in Colorado. It's a literal word, Mitzrayim, in Colorado. Ready for this? This is the Ogam inscription, which records an ancient name of Egypt, Musrai, or Mitzray, misery. This is in the chapter, excuse me, let me back up. This is in the chapter on the trail of the Egyptians. It was the Egyptian belief that the preservation of a name guaranteed the preservation of the being. In southeastern Colorado, a great boulder lies at the foot of a high conical butte. One part of the top of the cliff, the boulder, has tumbled down to its present resting place. Much later, visitors from another continent stood before it and selected it to bear record of their presence. They packed picturesque and script into the flat vertical surfaces facing the butte. These were photographed and traced in 1978. Part of the message we understood, but some will require more study in the integration of information from other sites. One inscription was recorded because it resembled ogam script, even though the stem line was vertical instead of the more usual horizontal orientation. This one word that resembles a Christmas tree in form tells much. There was a great surprise when Fell deciphered the script, which gave an ancient name for Egypt, Masrai. It was the Greeks who gave the country its modern name. They called Egypt, or Egyptos. Fell wrote, "This is an Arabic ogam." Fell, by the way, excuse me. Fell is the author of this book, America BC, among others. This Arabic ogam and almost certainly relates to Egyptian settlement Musrai, the original foundation or settlement. In particular, an original settlement by people from Egypt. The modern sense is al-Masrai, al-Misri equals Egypt. Later, he added to this information, MSR in Berber, Masra, Egypt, Misrai in modern Arabic for Egypt. Libyan Berbers and Bedouins of Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco knew these forms. Misraim in Hebrew, ancient and modern Egypt. Now that we have definite proof of the use of ogam script in Libya and Egypt, it's easy to recognize your symbol as the Libyan Berber, the word which means Egypt. The top split may be an A or a punctuation mark. If an A, then the word spells Masra. I will check further to find out if the version with an A is an identifiable dialect. Might be Rif or Morocco, but whatever the dialect, the meaning is Egypt. I believe I've seen the ogam version of African rocks, but did not recognize it when I was there in 77. We still lacked evidence that ogam was used for Egyptian words. So this book just literally goes through how often Egyptian hieroglyphs, petroglyphs, inscriptions are here in the Americas, found all over it, including their exact styles of boats. Same ones that are used, some of them for ceremonial purposes, like their ritual ones that are used for their transporting souls across the Lake of the Dead, all this stuff, okay? Straight up crocodiles and petroglyphs from Western Oklahoma, crocodiles, not alligators, different things. Okay, excuse me, I'll move that out of the way. So many of these, you know what they find? Like this guy holding that one, this Egyptian one here, this one here, okay? They were broken off of much bigger temple complexes that were destroyed when the settlers over here, before they came over, the Army Corps of Engineers, amongst many others, blew apart and destroyed the temple complexes in the modern cities that were there so that they could kind of substantiate this claim that, you know, these stupid, uncultured people can't be here. You know, they don't want to recognize that, yeah, a bunch of Hebrews were living on the top. You know, they're like, okay, we'll leave these temples in Mexico. You guys can have those. We'll totally accept that that's what it looked like out there. But we can't have that kind of narrative out here in the Americas. It's going to be a big problem for us. They don't want to be like, yeah, people have been coming back and forth across the plains here. Here's a Bat Creek stone, which is found in Tennessee, by the way. Paleo-Hebrew, straight up on there. Talking about the tribes of Judah. Stinking ridiculous. Surely I pray you, Yah, have pity. It's literally what's written on there. Ak la ya nud. Okay? Surely I pray thee, Yah, which is the abbreviation for Yahuwah, have pity. Okay, this is found, a second Hebrew inscription was found in an ancient grave near Bat Creek, Tennessee by the Smithsonian Institute in 1885. It has recently been translated and verified as authentic. This was literally under one of the digs from the Smithsonian, a documented case in Bat Creek, Tennessee, where they were digging into a mound. Shocker, they're like, let's go excavate it. Don't tell anybody else in the future what we find. Anyways, they found a bunch of Hebrew artifacts. Well, that doesn't fit the narrative very well, so they shipped it to the Smithsonian, and they obviously buried it. And they're like, we don't want anybody to know about it. Well, Tennessee, like the actual state, sued the Smithsonian to get it back, this stone. And the Smithsonian agreed under the clause that it has to be displayed upside down. So they had it displayed like this because the Paleo-Hebrew side of it, that's how it actually should sit. But instead, literally in all photographs, in all renderings, in the actual museums, they displayed it like this, you know, because these are the authors of confusion. These are the sons of Satan who are running the world. Freaking perverts. Can't wait for them to suffer their day of vengeance. May Yahuwah come and deal mightily. Anyways, you guys, I got to go. My children are looking at me like we got to vacate the premises immediately. I love you all so much. I hope you live prodigiously dangerous lives and you go ahead and read those books and build up for yourself some intellectual self-defense so that the snake eaters can't rule you so decisively, that you will read a multiplicity of books and be equipped with knowledge and understanding and a reverence of the Most High, that he is good and trustworthy, and he has watched over his word and has preserved it so we can know him and walk in truth and authority. I love you all. I pray you live dangerously every single day of your life, because the days may be evil, but hey, you, mighty man and woman of valor, were born for such a time as this. I love you guys. I'll talk to you soon.